Signal Sciences secures the most important web applications, APIs, and microservices of the world's leading companies, protecting over 7,500 applications and 150 billion production requests per week. Signal Sciences Next-Gen WAF and RASP help companies increase security and maintain site reliability without sacrificing velocity, all at the lowest total cost of ownership. Signal Sciences' patented technology protects any application against any attack, with integrations into any DevOps toolchain. Signal Sciences. Demand more from your WAF. Learn more at signalsciences.com/PSW. Do you need a web application security solution that can improve your detection rate and enable easier remediation? Acunetics has a fully automated solution that can detect and report over 4,500 web vulnerabilities. Fast and scalable, it can scan thousands of pages without interruption, including HTML5, JavaScript, and single-page applications. Acunetics provides accuracy with the lowest false positives by combining black box and white box testing. For more information, visit acunetics.com/Security Weekly.
Welcome back to Application Security Weekly. This is the news for the week of September 23rd. So first up, though, before we get into the news, we have a couple of quick announcements. DerbyCon is holding its first ever mental health and wellness workshop where I'll actually be speaking. So to help support their efforts, please go to derbycon.com/wellness. They have opportunities to donate, of course, for any sort of goods that are not purchased by the donations. The rest of it will be donated to charities supporting mental health and wellness in our community. Of course, also join us for our webcast with Logarithm about tips and tricks for defending the enterprise using open source tools. That webcast will be this Thursday, September the 27th at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. Finally, of course, check out our on-demand material. Some of our previously recorded webcasts are now available on demand at securityweekly.com/on-demand. Of course, there's Logarithm, Endgame, Black Hills InfoSec, and a number of other awesome webcasts. It looks like we got Signal Sciences in there as well, and Javelin Networks. So definitely go check that out. I enjoy quite a lot of that material, and I think you will too. So with that being said, April, where do you want to get started on the news this week? There's a plethora of stories for us to jump into.
I think we should talk about my cloud. Not my cloud, my cloud.
Oh, well, your cloud is, of course, puffy and very happy. But Western Digital's cloud, on the other hand, not so much. So story number one under bugs, breaches, and more. I don't know. April, did you want to describe the vulnerability on this? I'm happy to do so, but what I understand, it's authentication bypass.
Yeah, if you hooked your storage up to the internet, it was vulnerable. And
oh, that's great.
Yeah, I know. Go figure.
That sounds like a great idea.
I think what made this unique, though, is that it was vulnerable for like a year after the company was notified of this.
Yeah, it's this one, I thought it was absolutely ridiculous. So what I ended up seeing here was basically they have this authentication bypass, which basically says, okay, look, I don't even need to know your password. I just need to know that you're a user, and I can just get in, which is pretty terrible, first of all. And yeah, it was Remco Vermeulen. I'm going to pronounce their name terribly wrong, but they found a Pervesk bug that basically allowed them to go ahead and bypass and gain complete control over the user's data, reported it, and of course, Western Digital's like, oh yeah, we'll get around to fixing that now after it's been on for a year. So reported in April 2017, still not fixed.
Well, they released a hot fix 2 days after the story broke. So I guess the moral of the story is if it makes the news, they will patch it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I saw a story similar to this, gosh, I want to say earlier this week, or maybe it was over the weekend, but someone was basically saying, look, sunshine is the best kind of disinfectant here, and quite frankly, it's sad, but the more that we see companies dragged through the mud publicly in the news with situations that they just don't address, more quickly, they actually respond to these sort of things. And so I don't know why they didn't bother fixing it. I don't know if it was negligence, if it was a situation where, it was a cost factor. Somehow, somewhere, somebody accepted the risk, which either tells me they didn't understand the risk, or they did understand the risk and they didn't care. Or in this case, maybe they did care, but they didn't care enough because, new software needs to be written. We don't have time to fix bugs. But Yeah, they of course touted out the usual line that they take software, they take the security of this seriously, and basically they're going to have patches out. Of course, at the time of this article being written, they said within a few weeks. They had already had something like, I don't know, 14 months to deal with this, 15 months. I don't believe that firmware patches of any kind take that long to develop in today's modern development culture. Do you, April? I mean, you see development a lot as well. Is there any way that patching this could take that long, realistically?
No, I mean, I would guess that it probably slipped through the cracks or something. I mean, I can't imagine that that was sitting in a backlog for 14 months being reported up to management. It probably just didn't make it into the system correctly. I mean, it's hard to even fathom how that could happen. But one thing I was wondering was, like, so you're talking about accepting the risk. The user had to accept some sort of risk by hooking it up to the internet, but most users of my cloud are probably not that savvy. So I'm wondering if there's like some sort of pop-up or something that would warn them about the dangers of connecting your data to the internet.
Honestly, I don't know, other than to say that it's like, yeah, first of all, a lot of us use cloud-based storage, right? Like we use our Dropbox, or we use like Google Drive, or we use all those other sort of things. But there, we're actually mitigating some of the risk by putting that risk onto the company that is storing that data on our behalf, right? Here, it's quite literally you're hooking up your drive sitting on your desk or wherever it is, and it's now connecting out to the internet to store it in their cloud storage. What's crazy to me is I'm thinking about this back end, like this is a login mechanism problem with authentication bypass, which tells me simply they weren't doing input validation, and somewhere in that logic flow it basically just said, yep, you're good, which, by the way, probably because this is looking in a SQL database, I wouldn't be surprised if this authentication bypass is something like, I don't know, SQL injection, right? Like, or 1 equals 1 type thing, where it makes me wonder, given that there was authentication bypass here, how many customers' data was actually compromised by this, and if they even have a record of that, right? So I can't imagine people are going to go out of their way to sue Western Digital in this situation, because this probably isn't used by like large companies who would go out and go after them because, hey, everybody's Western Digital drive was connected to your cloud. But yeah, this is just, I don't know. It screams dumpster fire development to me.
No comment.
So, yeah. I don't know if you have any more to say about that, but that's all I had.
But they did encourage responsible disclosure, which I thought was interesting, especially if they're not going to respond within. They mentioned the 90-day responsible disclosure rule, and if they're not going to respond within the 90 days, I don't know why they would encourage responsible disclosure.
Yeah, it's funny talking to my good friend Josh Corman about it. He hates the term responsible disclosure, whereas Casey Ellis of BugCrowd actually really likes the term responsible disclosure. I always lean on Katie Masouris's coordinated disclosure, and even in this case, like the researcher was trying to coordinate with you over fixing the thing, and you just didn't want to coordinate. I don't know. If I were the researcher in this case, it's almost a situation of, you got to think of impact here, and in this case, it's hard drives with data, which sure is important and hopefully is encrypted, but at the same time, it's not lives at stake. And I think that you could probably reasonably say, okay, look, at 90 days, I'm just going to tell everybody on the internet unless you actually go and fix this thing. So I don't know. I would say this, right? People in the news media related to security are pretty easy to contact and are usually willing to run a story like this if you provide them enough details. So, yeah, if you're a company thinking about maybe just not fixing that thing that was reported to you, you probably should look at fixing it. So I'll just leave it there. Speaking of other interesting things related to code and fixing, story number 2 under Bugs, Breaches, and More, and actually somewhat related, story number 3, are both related to credit card data being stolen based on breaches of the company, basically like the checkout area. So story number 2 is related to Newegg, and story number 3 is actually related to hackers now going after local government payment sites. So, for example, if you want to go ahead and, I don't know, renew your registration on your car, for example, they might have a checkout that you can do that online. So I thought this is interesting because this is coming off the back, April, of the British Airways breach, right? And it looks like in this case, the Newegg breach is almost exactly the same. Did you was there anything out of this article that you pulled out that you thought was interesting?
So they got it. The attackers brought the code down from 22 lines of code to 8. Impressive. They used HTTPS that was signed by Komodo, so it looked like valid traffic, and they also they registered a domain neweggStats.com. So that got me thinking about how you could almost do reputational monitoring if you had some sort of capability to do this. I don't know if it exists, but if you could look, and it's much harder with like BA.com because BA appears in a lot of different domains, but if you could watch for domains that are being registered that match Newegg, that's something that you probably would want to know about. And then again with signed TLS or SSL certificates, looking for your brand name from the vendors that are providing those. And of course, it gets a little more tricky with like Let's Encrypt and self-signed and things like that. But it seems like a good way to detect potential phishing or these skimming attacks just by looking at the domain names.
So to your point, first of all, yes, there are in fact ways to go ahead and check for if your intellectual property is used in a name for registration of a web property. That service definitely does exist. The other side of it, though, when you relate to like Let's Encrypt, I believe Let's Encrypt is part of the certificate transparency reports that go out. I mean, I would imagine that they are, right? Maybe not, but again, being one of those things that's supported pretty widely by Google, Firefox, etc., right? They probably are going to go ahead and report that stuff back out. And so, yeah, to your point, if you're a company that's not monitoring the use of your intellectual property or your naming conventions for your website, especially if your entire model is in fact a website that's e-commerce, that's like selling things, you probably want to get on monitoring those stuff. And what concerned me, or what I thought was interesting here, is how did they get the code into the site, right? Like, did they do some sort of server-side injection where they changed the actual site HTML as it was on the server, and maybe they ran that periodically so that way any updates to the server itself was getting overwritten, or did they actually like break into Newegg and then add something into the code base that just totally got pushed and merged into production? That's the side of things that I always look back at, and I think to myself, like, there are ways to do this from the outside that reasonably could actually be leveraged to cause this sort of situation to come about. But in my mind, if you've got version control in place, you would know when someone was trying to change your checkout code, and therefore you'd probably have a pretty high indicator. I don't know. Did you catch any indication in your read of this, April, that seemed to indicate, how they got the code in? Because I didn't catch anything of that on my side.
I didn't either, but I did think it was really clever. I hate to say this, but it was really clever the way that they did it, because they put the code mid workflow. So as you're going through the checkout, it doesn't show up on like the first checkout page. Like, you have to get to where you're actually entering the credit card information, and then it just had some JavaScript, or it looks like JavaScript, that would call a URL, which was neweggStats.com, and it would submit a post on a form. So by not having it on the main page, let's say if you had like just scanning of the pages, if you just some automated scan running, it would probably only get to that first iteration of the workflow, unless you have some sort of customized automatic scan so that you're actually entering in data every time. You may not even notice that anything was happening.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, you think that things like content security policy, for example, might have helped them out, depending again on the attack vector here. There are any number of protections that it seems like maybe they didn't have in place, but I can imagine that after this has happened, you're probably going to see Newegg, be a pretty secure site for a little while. I'd say give it, at least a good 6 months or so. Maybe just in time for those Thanksgiving deals that come out every year, on Black Friday, as people always say here in the U.S. So, I don't know.
Shouldn't the browser be like looking for things like this?
A little bit, yeah. I mean, in this case, the post was to a domain that wasn't actually the same domain that this was living on. So yeah, the some of the rules around the way that cookies work and the way that the rules that based on your site configuration that allow you to make requests to uh, you know out of band sites, right? Like so, cross-site request forgery is quite literally this in reverse, where you're making a request to a site that's not from the site itself, right? So if I was making a request to Newegg.com from this NewEggStats.com, cross-site request forgery protections would actually protect you there. I haven't looked too deeply into if they would protect you on the outbound side as well. My gut feeling is that yeah, probably. And so who knows, right? But it sounds like they got caught a little bit with their pants down here in terms of, just like the code got in there, whether it was server-side request forgery or even server-side injection or even an actual breach of the company. Either way, I'm sure that they're reeling from this quite a lot, as is British Airways, it seems like. Moving on from that one, though, I did want to talk a little bit about story number 3 under bugs, breaches, and more, which is, in this case, that it looks like, credit card attacks are happening on local sites as well. The thing that got me here is, so FireEye was the one that basically confirmed that this Click2Gov servers operated by local governments across the U.S. Are likely vulnerable on the web server side to things like uploaded malware or even, just basic, again, server-side injection or any number of other things that are causing log data, such as credit card information that's in those logs, to get siphoned out. What concerned me here, though, is this, right? Basically, the log data is containing the credit card information, which by itself must be like a PCI violation.
Oh, yeah.
And then secondly, that they could intercept it while it's unencrypted on the network, right? Like, come on, are they even trying? I don't know. This story just irked me quite a lot. April, what did you think of this?
I noticed the PCI non-compliance as well. I was thinking, maybe they're not storing the credit card data in the logs. Maybe from the wording, it said that it was sifting through server log data for credit card data. That to me sounded like maybe they were looking for, I accidentally entered my credit card number in the name field or something like that. So when it got submitted, maybe it logged that part. But if they're getting the 3-digit code and the expiration date and everything, then from logs, they're definitely, that's a problem. The one of the interesting things that I thought was in Tyler, Texas, they reported that only in-person and online payments were affected. So phone payments were not affected. So that made me think, like, what are they doing differently over the phone to take payments if in-person payments are affected? I just didn't understand that.
Yeah, you think that like in-person payments wouldn't be affected, right? Because maybe they're actually like running the card right there,
Right.
but that maybe the over-the-phone payments would be affected because they're just using the website, right? Like effectively, that's what you'd think the workflow would be here, but who knew, right? Like maybe what they're doing is like they're actually like they're one ear, they're talking to you, the other ear, like they put you on mute and they're like talking directly to the card person to like run the card at the same time. I don't know, other than to say that like people have hackers all up in their stuff. Of course, these things are running Oracle WebLogic, which immediately makes me shudder. And of course, it's run by local governments, which, by the way, probably don't have a security team. And if they do, no offense to our good sysadmin friends, especially on the ops side, but it's probably a sysadmin who retired, came out of retirement, basically said, oh yeah, I know Oracle, and is running this, while collecting a paycheck just because. I don't necessarily trust almost any government to run this sort of stuff, especially given the amount of breaches and other things that they've had lately. But here we are with data breaches all up in our car registration stuff. I'm now gonna have to go down to town hall to re-register my car at some point.
I think they made the right decision though in trying to outsource the payment and everything rather than trying to like roll their own code to do checkouts and things like that. So they made the right choice, but there's still risk. It's just a different risk.
Right. In this case, it's the, hey, we're going to use your software. I'm sure that our tax dollars are probably being spent to procure this software. And then the software itself is garbage. I don't know. It seems like the sort of thing that you see in political kickback campaigns where someone spins up a company, does really shoddy development on it, sells it back to the government using the tax dollars of the citizenry, and makes out like bank. I don't know. I'm gonna have to do some digging on this. I'm not an investigative journalist by any means, but I really get the feeling that there's probably more dirt here than we're letting on. So, yeah, stay tuned. If I go on an angry rant about this at some point, you'll know why.
Well, luckily, credit freezes are available and free now. So
that's true.
Just in time.
That is true. Yes, just in time for the holiday season. So, speaking of things that put me on ice, or as it were, maybe get me fired up, is this whole John Hancock situation with their new policies, right? Like, we have been railing about this as being a potential issue in the security space for, I don't know, probably at least a few years. Paul's probably talked about this a lot more than either you or I, April. But John Hancock, which is a large North American life insurance company, in fact, it's one of the oldest, is now no longer going to be underwriting traditional life insurance policies. Instead, it's only going to be selling interactive policies that track fitness and health data through wearable devices and smartphones, which, like, I cringe, and then I think of that movie Gattaca, like, right away. I don't know. What were your thoughts on this, April?
So
I'm just verklempt.
I may have misread it, but what I read was that they were going to, yes, only be offering fitness tracked policies, but there seemed to be one policy that you could enter your own stats rather than having a wearable. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Like, that there's all kinds of fraud that I just started to think about. Like, what if, like, as I have my Apple Watch here, there's all this fraud. I was thinking, like, what if I just wore 5 Apple Watches for somebody and I started a service where I just go work out?
Yeah, no, that's Gattaca. That is the movie Gattaca, folks. You don't have, spoiler alert, you don't even have to watch it anymore. Watch it, get it, your Apple Watch. So in this case, yeah, it's like, first of all, yes, people sharing watches with others or registering watches with others who are in fact fit and then selling fitness as a service, like it'd be your FAS. I don't know.
I literally wrote that down. Yeah.
Your fitness as a service.
Yep.
We're gonna have to monetize this somehow, April. Clearly, I'm not very fit, but my wife likes to run half marathons. So, hey, folks, if you're open to fitness as a service, hit me up.
I think that counts as insurance fraud, but
oh, fair, true. Don't hit me up, actually.
Yeah. So the other thing I was thinking about was how. So they are providing devices to people as part of the service that they're offering. But I was wondering if you manage the device, or if it's managed like a BYOD device where they have control over it and they have a policy on the device somehow. I don't even know if you can do that with a watch, but I was just curious, like, who is managing the device, and then when I get home and this connects to my network or this connects to my LTE or whatever, then it's in my ecosystem with my other devices. How do I keep it away from, like, can I have like a guest VLAN or an IoT VLAN where I put all this stuff and they can't talk to each other? Like, it just raises so many questions.
Right, like, who owns the device, first of all, right? Is it you or them? If you cancel your policy, do you have to give back the device? And then secondly, you're right, who maintains it, right? So does it get patches? Is my data secure? If they monitor or maintain the device and it doesn't get patched and it gets hacked and my data gets stolen, am I liable? Are they liable?
That's true. And this has a microphone. I mean, if this gets hacked and
someone's listening to the show live right now, right off your Apple Watch. I mean, yeah, it's a situation where it's just like, I can't possibly fathom this being reality, and yet here we are. And apparently, by the way, they like cite in the article that it's popular in places like Europe, and I'm like, no, it's not. Like, they are so security conscious. This is just, I wanted to rage and pull out the hair that I don't even have on my head. So yeah, needless to say, I'm really disappointed in John Hancock's decision here. I get the feeling that this is just going to be the first of many situations that we encounter. And yeah, we probably will see people committing insurance fraud by either strapping their watch to somebody else or maybe hacking the actual metrics on it itself. But I don't know. I'm not really excited about this, other than to say I'm never going to be buying a watch of this nature. So at some point, I'm just not going to be insurable by life insurance. It's just going to happen.
Well, for now, you can still choose another provider, but if everybody moves to this model, which is more of a traditional risk-based model for the insurance companies, if privacy-conscious people are choosing other companies, then the free market will fix this, hopefully.
Well, But everybody wants one of those fancy new watches, April. What do you mean? They're just giving them away. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's eventually going to take over the market, and we're all doomed to be slaves to our new, insurance watch giving overlords. It brings a whole new meaning to who's watching the watchers. But but with that being said, I also wanted to cite, by the way, my lack of faith in both governments and perhaps even in some cases insurance agencies on protecting data, because lo and behold, the State Department confirms a data breach under story number 2 for "If you build it, they will come." Every time someone says, "Oh yeah, we should have key escrow for the government," or they should have some sort of encryption backdoor, or I don't know. They basically want to be able to access our private devices with subpoena, of course, but they want to be able to do so. My mind immediately goes to situations just like this one. April, what were your thoughts on this article?
Well, so I thought it was really, really weird that they're using Office 365. And they said 11% of the agency devices, only 11% had multi-factor authentication.
Here's the thing is, I like to say they say only 1% of their devices were compromised here. 1% of their data was compromised. But in my mind, the little asterisk that goes right behind there is that they know of, right? Again, they only had a very small distribution of two-factor authentication. Pretty clearly, two-factor authentication is a big deal. I mean, come on, we've been making a huge deal about it from the 2016 election. And by the way, these YubiKeys and things like that, pretty inexpensive. You'd think that maybe they could just, distribute them to everybody everywhere. I don't know. It's just, the whole federal government security thing, I kind of just want to cry a little bit and laugh at the same time and realize that, hopefully it's just as bad everywhere else, because if we ever end up in World War III, we're totally screwed. Totally screwed. Our data is going to be in the insurance companies that are going to get breached, and then our government's just going to be like, oh yeah, all that data you gave to us, OPM, that's now been breached too. So I don't know. I'm being a sourpuss this week and just putting the kibosh on everything. So,
well, there was no MFA, and it's a legal requirement for them to do it. It seems like one of the simplest things that you could roll out. It's already built into 365. It's not like they're writing code. All they have to do is flip a switch and require their users to use MFA. I did not really understand why that would be so difficult.
Yeah.
Did you see the letter that the senators wrote that asked they asked for 3 years of attack data for systems located abroad?
Yeah, this was okay, good luck getting that. Did they even have 3 years of the data, first of all? So I don't even know.
That's like the ultimate FOIA.
Yeah, right. It's they don't have that data. That data's gone. And if they did have it, they're probably burning it. They're like, no, delete that drive. Log into the MyCloud drive that's now been compromised and go delete that data, because that's how they're collecting their logs probably.
And the OMB said that the State Department's readiness is at high risk. So that means that there's other problems, and the State Department is a particularly juicy target for nation states,
you think,
who have advanced capabilities and tons of person power to throw at things.
You wonder why Secretary of State, or then Secretary of State Clinton, ran her own email server. Just saying. Moving on, though, because I made you read it, as much as it was a very long article, story number 3 under If You Build It, They Will Come, The Man Who Broke Ticketmaster. This was actually a pretty cool article for as long-winded as it was, because it actually talked about, the historical views of someone who basically was a scalper, right? Like he went out and grabbed a bunch of tickets to a bunch of different shows. And then eventually basically got caught and is now either facing jail or is in the process of being prosecuted. But this was kind of a neat story, especially because it doesn't actually involve bots and automation as much as one would think. What were your thoughts on this, April, since I gave you the homework?
Yes, thank you. It's a really long article. So I thought this was particularly heinous because tickets are already really expensive. So by jacking up the prices, it just makes it worse for all of us. But this really reminded me of InfoSec because it's a cat and mouse game between the people who are trying to break the system and the people that are trying to fix the system and defend against it. So now today he's working with artists and teams to try to fix the problems in the process and the systemic problems. But I also thought it was really interesting when he talks about how back in my day, which is true for me as well, when you had to call Ticketmaster, he would use social engineering techniques to call a little bit before. Let's say 10 a.m. when the tickets went on sale, and he would chat up the person on the phone, and then build some rapport, and eventually say, "Hey, would you mind reserving 4 tickets to the show that opens in 30 seconds?" And then they would do it. And he even knew the keys that the person would have to hit to order the tickets and everything. And I just thought that was pretty genius.
Yeah, I mean, this is traditional hacking 101, right? He hacked the people.
Mm-hmm.
What was amazing to me is then he basically hired a boiler room setup where he had almost everybody do this, right? And so he'd get, in the very top of the article, they talked something like 496 out of 500 tickets that were available for U2 in New York, 492 out of 500 in Boston, 496 out of 500 in LA. Holy crap. This guy definitely robbed the bank, and then of course when you turn this around, he makes, I don't know, probably a 4x markup on each ticket. So yeah, crazy money.
I'm sorry. There was an interesting use of ML in the scenario too, because when the Ticketmaster CAPTCHA. So when he had to, he made a very important legal distinction that they didn't hack CAPTCHA, they didn't break CAPTCHA. What they did was there were only 30,000 unique images that were used in CAPTCHA at the time, so they put them in a database, and they downloaded all the images, put them in a database, and then they taught the bot how to recognize those images. So they were just answering the CAPTCHA. They weren't actually hacking it. I thought that was really clever.
Yeah, this is I'm sure the team at Ticketmaster was 30,000's enough. Nobody's ever gonna have 30,000. And then these days you look at 30,000 as a number for machine learning, and you're that's not even a snack. That's okay, we're done. 10 seconds later, we now have all the data. Yeah, that was incredible. For those that are willing to put in a little bit of reading time, again, sorry, April, I didn't realize it was this long either. But at story number 3 under If You Build It, They Will Come. Just being cognizant of the time, I know we've run a little bit long today. The last thing I just want to leave folks with is 2 things. So go to Food for Thought, story number 2. It's new security settings available for iOS 12 for those of you that have iPhone devices. And then, of course, or iOS devices, I guess. Lastly, the commit strip. How long will it be alive? I'm not going to spoil it for everybody, but needless to say, your code will outlive you. Just think about that for a minute. Anyway, thank you everyone for joining us this week for another episode of Application Security Weekly. Remember to git, commit, and stay classy.